Welcome back to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, the show where we talk honestly about what it actually takes to keep up showing for ourselves, our minds, and our lives. I'm your host, Sayan, as most of you would already know, and today's guest brings a conversation that I think is going to land deeply for so many listeners. Our guest today is Brooke DeBoer, and today we are going to talk about overcoming abuse and toxic relationships and the journey of stepping back into a life that feels in your control, not someone else's idea or someone else's idea of recovery. And I invite you all, honestly, to join me on this journey because I hope that you walk away with something soft to carry with. So, Brooke, welcome to the show. It's nice to have you here. And I think this is going to be hitting some best soft for most of our listeners today. So I hope to make this that, self-realization moment, one of those self-realization moments. So yeah, nice to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Likewise. So a little disclaimer for all the listeners that have joined us right now. Some statements may reflect personal belief and experiences and are presented as individual views and not medical advice. Listeners should consult qualified professionals for medical conditions. So, before we kind of jump into the heavier parts of this conversation and even get to talk about abuse, I want to start somewhere with you because I think the work you do, the conversations that you're part of, they require so much, I would say, active listening, but also so much courage. So, what was it first which told you that, your story was one that needed to be shared, perhaps? So, when did you know this was something that you had to speak about?
Well, for a long time, I've felt like I carried stories inside of me that I should share. I love to help people. I love to talk to people. I'm very curious and interested in what makes people tick and how I can help people's lives be better. Ever since I was a little girl, I always cared a lot about. I still have a little note that I wrote to my parents. I can't even remember where I was, but it's a little handwritten note that just says, "I hope you're happy." And I think I've always just been very empathic. I could pick up on people's feelings and emotions. And after I went through several experiences of bullying and then got into a couple of abusive relationships and began to heal and make a stand for myself, that was the point where I started to encounter other people or hear other stories of people going through similar things. And I realized that my story wasn't really too unique. And as I got just a little bit older, it took me a long time to have the courage to share it out in the world.
Mm.
So I probably realized I needed to share it. And then there was a big space between when I actually shared it. But as I grew and I wanted to help people more, and I was in this space to help people more because I was more healed. It's a constant process, though, I feel like. When you've been through trauma, it's a lifetime of healing that you go through. But as I got older and I started to get involved in nonprofit activity and helping and learning more about the statistics of abuse and domestic violence and different things associated to some of the experiences I had had, I realized it was really important to tell these stories to empower other people to know that they can heal, they can also come out of this, and that they're not alone.
Yeah, I mean that's a pivotal part in one's life, and I think ultimately the decision you took, Brooke, I'm sure that you had a positive outlook about everything that has perhaps happened to you at that point, right? When you look back now, so I want to take this further to the next level because I think there's a misconception among so many of us that I think a lot of people would resonate today because I think it really centers on toxic or abusive relationship, and that once someone leaves that circle, the hard part is over, just exiting. But what do you think? Anyone who has actually lived through it knows, I think it's often where the real work begins, maybe. But I'm curious how you have battled that and how you understand that whole process right now after walking your own path.
Yes, once I left the last abusive relationship that I experienced, the healing just started, because having the courage to leave is one step, but then rebuilding your self-confidence and trusting your ability to accept love into your life that's actually a healthy kind of love, and just being able to not sabotage the good that comes your way once you've exited an abusive situation, I think is really quite a process. I can tell you that my husband came along after I had left the abusive relationship, and when he came along, I had done a lot of healing work. I had done some praying about my life and asking God to help me heal the wounds. In my situation, I had become a single mother with the abusive person and then left that situation. So I also became a mom and was learning how to be a mom at the same time. So when my husband came along, the first time he told me he loved me, I couldn't say it back right away because it was such a sweet kind of a love. It was a different, respectful kind of love that I didn't have before, and I almost didn't feel like I deserved. So I then became aware that I needed to do some work on knowing that I deserved this kind of love, that this was the right kind of love. This was the love that is how it's how it should feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does makes a lot of sense, Brooke. And I think it's really grounding how you framed the last part, because I think we all have been in situations where, you know, I mean, there was a quote from a movie actually. I'm not exactly able to recall what that was, but eventually what it meant was that, we all chase the love that we deserve, right? But I think that's a very famous movie. I'm not able to remember the name right now. But honestly, I would say it's not always about you, right? It's not always about what you think you deserve. It's more about how someone makes you feel, and then at a point you feel like, okay, he or she is being just way too nice, and that's where the shame or the guilt starts kicking in, and that is the exact moment when you or one individual should realize that, okay, there's more to this. Perhaps this whole idea of love, or that boundary, whatever that is, whatever that arbitrary thing it could be, that for which you're feeling the shame or guilt right now, is induced in you because of these external validations, maybe from your parents, your friends, movies, could be a lot on the list, right? So I think it's so important, and I'm really glad that you brought that last point up, is that you realize that you are in, or you should be in, a healthy and a very respectful, I would say, dynamic with your partner, because that's where I think you start realizing what real love actually looks like. And it's more about, less about self validation, right? And with that,
Right.
Brooke, I would like to go into the next layer of this conversation, because I think for someone who's listening to this today, but just before that, I would love to ask, how does I would say, what do survivors often discover that they have been quietly carrying long after the relationship ended? So if you can name a few things, maybe, so that you know we understand from there how can we start with the healing process.
Well, I think wounds is a great word. It's like little cuts or little little put downs and things that say you're not enough just as you are, that come from verbal abuse. And then the physical abuse tells you that you're not deserving of being safe and held in a loving sort of a way. And I think we collect these things when we're in an abusive relationship because they are things that are said and done to us, and they begin to drown out the good things the confidence and the good things that we see and know of ourselves. That voice becomes, I think, louder and more overpowering. And I think we live in more fear when we're in a relationship like that. We're afraid of being hurt, so we comply, or we do what the other person is expecting of us. And then slowly our voice gets smaller and smaller inside because we're not exercising it. We're not using it. We're not able to say what we think and feel comfortable being who we are. So, and as far as how long it takes to heal for a relationship like this, for me, like I said, it's been a lifetime. There's lots of layers. It's like peeling the layers of an onion. You get one thing sorted and then another thing sort of pops up and appears. But if you continue to seek the tools, and for me, learning about my relationship to God has been really helpful, and how God is my parent and loves me unconditionally. And then also, trusting in the strength of God to heal throughout over time. For me, that's really helpful. But then there's also some other really good tools out there. There's a book by Jackson McKenzie that I read that was called Whole Again, and he described the protective self that happens when you're in an abusive or dysfunctional relationship where somebody isn't honoring or respecting you. And it's like a broken heart inside of a circle. And then the behaviors that we do and take on to kind of help us not feel the pain of that broken heart often tend to be the layers that we need to find and peel off so that we can find our true self, because those are more just defense mechanisms. They're things that we do to cover the pain, but they're not necessarily healthy and functional things for us. For me, it was overworking and over-proving. I don't know if that's even a real term, but working so hard to prove myself, prove my worth, prove that I could accomplish and do things. And, some people get caught up in working so much on their appearance that they forget that, working on our inner self is really important too. Or sometimes people fall into drugs and alcohol abuse because it numbs out that pain. There's a variety of different ways that we do that. But as far as how long it takes for somebody to heal, that's a very individual process, in my opinion. And it's one worth doing, because once you get into it, and with the support of healthy people and professionals, it is possible to heal. And slowly the negative voices and the other things will start to fade away for you, I believe. In any case, as long as you have the right support around you and the right tools.
Wow, I kind of think there's so much honesty to it, because I think the process of healing is never, a finish line that
Right.
firstly you can see from a mile away, that this is where I need to reach in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So, I mean, that's never healing. And in the process itself, I mean, it's never a fixed process, right? You keep reiterating so much. So I think it's really a relationship that we keep deepening with ourselves, with more patience and with more understanding of ourselves. And somewhere in that process, I think we are able to restore our core values. And when that happens, I think that is when we realize that we are going towards the right direction. So, Brooke, one last thing that I would want to ask, because
Sure.
I think a lot of us might be in spot where they're not, I mean, they really don't have any friends or people to, have these kind of conversations too right now. So maybe before we go, I would love to ask you that what would you really like to tell them right now, from you to them, just in one single idea, if you were have to paraphrase the whole thing, what would you want them to hear right now who are carrying way too much?
Well, you are a masterpiece of God's creation. Every single one of us is. And every single one of us has everything that we need inside our heart to live life with purpose, with love, and with fulfillment. And it's your job to make a stand for yourself in this lifetime as you would take care of a masterpiece of art.
That's
So
something.
I think that sums it up, right? Like, if you
Yeah.
have a masterpiece by Picasso or something in front of you, you're not going to sit it on the floor or stomp on it or let people walk on it or not take care of it and
I'm
let
gonna be honest with
it.
you. It's kind of weird and ironic that, we value these, millions of dollars worth of
Mm.
things,
Yeah.
that's right in front of us, but we never get to see us for who we are. It's the same analogy as, like a mirror. We are like a mirror, honestly, like the mirror can see, it reflects everything, but the mirror really can't see itself. So, it's the same analogy with the human consciousness. We are way too much conscious about what's in front of us. And maybe that is perhaps I would say the ending idea of this conversation is that I think we are valuable, and that, we are never, we should never, lower our values, lower our voices for someone or a pair of incidents or instances that could change our life. I think that is what I would like all our listeners to take away from this conversation. But Brooke, I think this has been an honest and an eye-opening conversation, really. So for listeners who want to keep walking with your work, follow you, or even connect with you and send you a DM, where's the best place to find you at?
I think the easiest place is on Instagram, and it's at free, the word free, and then Brooke with an E. Or you can go to my website, which is thebrookedeboer.com. That's a little more challenging because you have to spell my last name, but hopefully you'll add it to your show notes and you can message me there.
Brilliant. So we'll have that in the show notes for you all so that you could easily reach out, Brooke. And folks, with that, I think the life that you were always meant to live did not disappear and cannot disappear. I think that's something that you have to wait for yourself to choose yourself again and again every time. So that is what I would like you all to perhaps leave with today. And if something in this conversation did reach you today, maybe take that one step and come up with something afterwards, because I think stories like this often unlock things in us that we didn't know we were still holding. So if something inside you finally gets stirred, I would want you all to please follow the show Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, because we are exactly for conversations like this. And this has been Cyan, folks. So I just want you all to take care of yourself this week. And with that, we'll see you the next one again.